Welcome to the Healing Bitch podcast. I'm Jackie Ortez, a psychic medium that has a penchant for all things spiritual. During this time with me, we will explore the world of energy and how it affects us all. Each podcast will address a question submitted from my listeners that I feel I have the authority to answer. So get comfy, throw on your headphones, and let's see what happens. Hi, and welcome back to the Healing Bitch podcast. My name is Jackie Ortez, and we are now on episode 4. We're going to be talking about death today. So I wanted to have a little bit of a cozier environment, and I'm going to do this podcast from home. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you probably noticed that my background is different. And yes, this is my actual home. You may see my cat running up and down the steps, which just adds to the comfiness of this subject. So when I do subjects for podcasts, I ask a lot of people beforehand what they think of them. And when I brought up death, a lot of different reactions came to me from the people that I love and the people that I know. Some people are scared of it. Some people don't want to even think about it. It was the biggest reaction, and the most common reaction was fear. So I want to take a little bit of the stigma out of death in this episode. I want to take it out because it's the one thing in our life that we cannot escape is death. So growing up, the way I felt about death was not fantastic. It was not great. I remember as a child, I had a cross with Jesus above my bed, as most people who are Catholic do. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and look at it and just start thinking about death. And then I would think about the eternity of death is what really scared me. The fact that it went on and on and on for all of eternity with no end. My little mind couldn't grasp it because I was being taught that there was heaven and hell. And you went to heaven if you were good, you went to hell if you did things were bad. But I was also being taught that God was all forgiving. God was the only person or only being that could judge you. Yet I felt like humans were judging each other. And I don't want to go off on that tangent. That's something else that we're going to get into later on. But I'd wake up in the middle of the night. I would look up at this Jesus on the cross. I would feel, and my mind would start to think about all of eternity being in another realm and no end in sight. And I would just have waves of terror going through my body, terror. And it was so uncomfortable. I would get out of bed and I would crawl into bed with my mom. And I remember doing this for not like a lot, but it did happen. And through the years, it developed into this thing where I would be in the bathroom and I would look at this like doorknob that was on the bathroom closet. And I would think in my head, other people who were on this earth before me have looked at that doorknob and they're gone. And one day that doorknob is still going to be here and I'm going to be gone. So that's how I started warming myself up to the subject. I still wasn't comfortable with it. I tried to approach it in therapy through the years, and it was the one subject that it just sent shivers through me. It doesn't do that anymore. I have had a few experiences with death through the years. My belief in this is that when we die, we turn back into our true selves, and our true form, which is a form of energy, and we go to a different realm. We have consciousness, but it's a consciousness that's just like so much more developed than what we have right now as a human. Like our thoughts will be expanded. We'll be able to understand information and understand why things happened in our lives the way they did through the years. You will also see everybody that you've loved. I personally believe in multiple lifetimes. So after we become this other consciousness and version of ourselves, eventually we decide to go down back to Earth or whatever other planet or dimension there is, and start life all over again as a different being and a different person. And I also believe that we get to choose how we want to appear. We get to choose our parents. We get to choose the family. We get to choose what we're going to heal. And there are different levels. So say this lifetime for myself, I spent a long time healing. Say I go back on Earth, right? I've learned so many lessons in this lifetime that my next life will be easier. And I won't have as many lessons. I'll just have the ones that are left over from this lifetime. So I know personally, I have went through a lot of sessions of past lives. And specifically with my practitioner, we dive into past lives and how they're still affecting me in this lifetime. And we use Ho'oponopono. And if you don't know what that is a Hawaiian method of healing and forgiveness. And we use it and we get those lessons and those feelings that are left over me from other lifetimes out. So that's my belief and how I got to this for death. But also I've had experiences where I have watched two people die. One person was one time was in person. It was my grandmother. It was actually a really weird experience. This was the first time. And she was on hospice. She was in her 90s. And I think we knew she was passing. And then several people were at the house, like 10 or 15 people of my relatives and people who wanted to say goodbye to my grandma. And my mom and my aunt were with my grandma, holding her, like her hands and praying and everything. And she passed in front of all of us. And then everyone just like hung out after. And that was the first time I saw someone die. And I was like, oh, this was a very different experience. And it wasn't that scary. It was a little traumatic to me at the time because I wasn't into this as much, but now I understand that everyone needed to be there and she was happy that everybody was there. But the second time I watched someone pass was unfortunately my father, and it was on Zoom. And he was in the hospital because it was December of 2020 and he got sick with what was going around and he was put on a ventilator, and then the doctor called us and told us that it didn't look good. So me, my brother, my sister, my mom, and my aunt got on Zoom and we saw my dad take his last breath. And that was really interesting too, because I remember hearing, excuse me, hearing my aunt and my mom saying, hold on, Miguel, or hold on, Mike. You can stay here, like, and I'm pretty sure I was saying this out loud. I wasn't just saying it in my head, but I was saying, you can go, Dad, you can go. And I believe in that moment that my father may have had a choice to go or not. And he knew that if he stayed and recovered from what he just went through, he wouldn't have had the life that he wanted. He knew we were going to be okay without him. Yes, we would mourn him and we would miss him, but we would be okay. And let me tell you, my dad is a fucking force on the other side. He is a force for me, and his family comes through for me all the time. So those are my two experiences that I watched people die. And then I had a really interesting client experience a few months after my dad passed. It was February of 2021. I had a client, I received a phone call And I saw that was from one of my clients who usually doesn't call me. We're in touch through Facebook and text and, little things here and there, but she doesn't usually call me. So I was like, okay, I think it was like later at night. It was dark out. So maybe it was after 5 p.m. So I answered the phone and she told me that her father was passing, but he was having issues with passing. He just wouldn't let go. And she felt strongly that she needed to call me to have me help her have him pass. I had never had any experiences with actually really helping someone pass, but I had connected to energy. I had connected to people's energy in other places for years at this point. So I was like, okay, yeah, let me see what I can do. I lit one of those mini taper candles. I said a little prayer. I connected with his energy and I told him, you can pass, like it's okay, you can pass. And then he wound up passing about 10 minutes after, is what I'm going to say. And usually I would be like, oh, that's just a coincidence, He passed right after he was already passing. I had nothing to do with this. But this client had went to I believe it was a psychic or medium or a friend that's intuitive or something a few months later. And they specifically told her that her friend helped her father pass, which was me. And that blew my mind and opens my mind up to death and connection and just I don't know, it definitely caused a big shift in me and it made me feel more comfortable with death because I was also connecting with spirit at the time. So I understood that we're never really gone. We're just, we're in a different place. But today, we're going to be having an interview. I'm going to interview my first person for this podcast, and I am so excited about it because she is a death doula. And you might be saying, what in the fuck is a death doula? So she is someone just like somebody a regular doula who helps with the birth and gives support to the mother before she gives birth and makes the plan and everything. A death doula assists the family. So I don't want to talk too much about this because I want Lindsey to be able to say it. But yeah, welcome. And let's get into the interview. So today we're joined by Lindsey Guttilla, the owner of Hudson Mind, Body, Spirit. Lindsey is a highly skilled medium, healer, and spiritual mentor whose journey has led her to the sacred role of a death doula. She offers a unique blend of deep empathy, spiritual wisdom, and practical support to help individuals and their families navigate the end-of-life journey with grace and love. Her warm, intuitive presence makes her work healing and profoundly transformative to all she meets. So welcome, Lindsey.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this because death is such a subject that has a stigma around it. And even when I was doing the research for this podcast and I was talking to people about it, nobody even wanted to discuss it with me. They were like, I'm not sure I'm going to listen to that because death scares the shit out of me. So I wanted to talk to you because you have such a unique job, I'm just going to say, as a death doula and experiencing it. So can you just take us into, I guess, a little bit of how you got into this and when your interest in death started?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, death is probably my favorite thing to talk about, death, dying, all of it and everything in between and beyond. So, I started my death doula journey actually around the same time that I began my work in healing and mediumship. It was the same, it just kind of all came together at once. It wasn't something that I ever planned from the beginning and to be honest with you, I spent, 20 plus years in hospitality and 18 years as a bartender prior to that. So if you had told me even a few years before that I would have been a death doula and a medium, I would have like fallen off my bar stool. So, but yeah, it wasn't something I planned from the beginning, but as I was exploring spiritual healing, I really felt this deep pull towards death work as well. And it all kind of came together at once. And I began to see how interconnected life, death, and spirit truly are. And I realized that there was so much fear and discomfort and avoidance, like you
Mhm.
said, around death, both for those who are dying and for their loved ones. And I really felt called to step into this space to help guide people through this transition with compassion and with presence, that same kind of presence that I was bringing into a healing session, per se. And that's really how my path as a death doula began, I would say.
That is awesome. I love that death is like your favorite subject to talk
Yeah.
about.
Every
I
conversation ends up there, I feel, even like random strangers in a supermarket. Like it's just, I don't know what it is. I think I'm just like a magnet for death talk.
It's probably because you love it so much,
Yeah.
honestly, that it just turns into that. That happens with me with sometimes like the spiritual work and the energy of the world. So I spoke about earlier in the podcast, one of my strangest experiences with death and
Mhm.
a client calling me. So I wanted to know, what is a strange or interesting experience that you've had that really like sticks out in your mind?
Wow, there's so many. Um, you know, okay, so I think one of the main things that happened, there was two significant deaths that happened before I became a death doula that I knew in the moment, even though I didn't have a connection like really with God. I felt like God was talking to me in that moment. I had like a really significant mystical experience where I knew that where I was sitting in that moment in the presence of someone dying was so significant to my life path and my purpose. And it was just like, God was like, this is your purpose. Like, I was like, like, what am I doing here?
No
One,
pressure.
yeah, no pressure. One was that I was um, in a space where I was the witness to someone dying who I did not know. And I was there in those final moments, intimate moments, and very, unbelievable emotion in that room with their sibling and their parents only. And I am a stranger. I just happened to be driving the person. And the person that I was driving, their parents left the car at the hospital and they had to go and take their child off life support. And
Mm.
I remember it was a snowstorm and I remember driving these parents to the hospital and I just remember like these waves of feeling were coming over me like how can I be in this space right now? Like,
Mhm.
like really like what the fuck is happening, first of all. And like my whole body, I have the chills now even talking about this because it's like, holy shit. My whole body just like was like vibrating and the chills. I was just like, oh my gosh, and I also at the same time felt like I wanted to throw up, with anxiety. But then all of a sudden, this peace just came over me. And
Mhm.
I just knew like, I am supposed to do this now. I am the person that is meant to be in this space now. And I don't know why. And I probably will not know for some time. But I just, boom, it was just suddenly like, I am a space holder. Like, I just like walked into the hospital. They're like, come in the room. And I just sat there. And that was my initiation into holding space. And I was just that presence. And I mean, there were so many things that because I did not know yet that I was mediumistic and that
Mhm.
I was experiencing that moment, like I was having a shared death experience with this person who was dying. And I was also, just looking at the mother, like tucking their child in, the blankets around them as their body was shutting down. And I remember just like feeling everything, being a vessel for her pain, being a vessel for this person passing, the family, the weird family dynamics that were going on in the room, and like just all of the emotions. I felt like they were just coming through my body. And wow, it's almost hard to even put into words. I don't ever think
Mhm.
I've actually described it in this way, but at the end of it, the mother just came over me and just gave me a huge hug. And she's like, thank you so much for being here. Like, it was just, you just had to be here. And I was crying, everybody's crying. And it was just like, wow. And then, I was with the family, um, I actually got snowed in with them, because we had like 3 feet of snow that night. And I just was, I guess, like kind of this support person who didn't know the family that well, but I was suddenly their death doula. And I just knew that that was a piece of the puzzle, and into moving forward. So I don't know if I would say weird, but yeah, it was weird because it was just so shocking. It literally was just like a lightning bolt, like, boom, this is what you're doing now.
That's so, I'm just going to say that feels so significant.
Yeah.
Like almost feel like the emotion, I feel the emotion behind it. Like I feel like my eyes watering a little bit as you're talking about it, because
Yeah.
not only is it significant that you were able to hold space for a family that you didn't know, it was a child that was passing.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And that alone just, I feel like, amplifies the grief of death, because it's such a short life for them to live. That's intense.
Yeah. And then in the weeks following, there were a lot of mediumistic experiences that were happening. This person was coming to me and giving messages for the family. And I was just like, I don't even know, like, and I didn't know them. So, I mean, I
Mhm.
couldn't, and it was just, and I think, of course, when grief or tragedy or, happens, it's oftentimes a significant opening for people and their spiritual emergence and awakening. And that's exactly what happened. And that was in oh my gosh, that was like 7 years ago, almost 8 years ago. And yeah, that was my initiation into that work. And now fast forward, I mean, it's just unbelievable how
Mhm.
much that person that passed, that, child that passed, has influenced and impacted from beyond, like their family and what their sibling is doing. It's just absolutely remarkable. There are no words how many lives that person has touched within their passing.
It's unbelievable, because some people, like my father, when he was here, he was a very recognizable person, very strong personality, but on the other side, he's a total fucking force.
Wow.
And like with me and everything. So it's a very similar situation to that, but it's really interesting how sometimes people that don't get to have a huge impact while they're living, once they go to the other side, it's they're moving the chess pieces for us. They're
Totally.
really assisting it. And it's beautiful that the family of that child is even able to recognize
Mm-hmm.
how the assistance is coming from beyond.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. So I'm going to move into, I don't get to talk to mediums that often.
Oh, cool.
So I'm really curious,
Mm-hmm.
because how spirit comes through for you. Because for me, spirit comes through in my mind's eye,
Mm-hmm.
almost like I'm imagining the person. Like, I can see the person, but I also, it's like the old way that they used to make cartoons is the only way I can explain it. Where it's like there's Mickey Mouse, or there's the character, and
Right.
then there's the overlay that has like the tree and maybe some birds. That's how it is in my mind. Like I see what's actually in front of me, like earthly things. And then there's like an overlay of someone that just like comes in, but I don't physically see them in front of me. I still see them in my mind.
Right.
So I don't know if that makes sense,
Yeah.
but you
Mhm.
see spirit and communicate with them?
Great question. I would love to talk about. This is a huge topic, but I'm gonna try and break it down. So it's really crazy because I mean, as a child, I saw spirit, and I, was like would freak out my family, and I was told,
Mhm.
don't say that again. I'd be like, who's that woman standing there? I saw them what we call objective clairaudience. So objective
Yes.
clairaudience or clairvoyance, sorry, excuse me. Clairvoyance is when we see spirit like objectively, like we're seeing a person. It's not going to appear exactly like a person, I will say. They're a bit hologrammy looking, but
Hmm.
um, I remember this was very normal to me, and I thought that everyone could see what I was seeing. That's how, it was. And I think most children are very open to spirit and they see spirit in the same way.
Hmm.
And this is why some children have trouble sleeping and there's a lot of activity, and it's usually just loved ones. There's nothing to be afraid of, like in spirit. And so, I shut all of that down, obviously, because I was terrified as a child. And then and I was constantly being told that, it was wrong and that mediums were the devil and all of that. So I had a lot of clear spiritual conflict, I think was a good way of describing it growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And my family that loved me was telling me that there was something wrong with me, like for what I was doing and seeing and experiencing, which I had no control over. And so when I was around 30 years old, my sister's boyfriend actually passed very tragically. And I was driving her to a appointment with a medium, and the medium was a 15-year-old girl from Lyndhurst, and like it was, yeah, the reading itself was totally crazy. I had never had a reading before, and at the very end of it, she just was like, "Oh, by the way, do you know what you were in your past life?" And I was like, and my sister's like looking at me like, and she's like, "Oh, you were a witch in Salem," and I was like, okay. And she's like, "You're a medium just like me." She's like, "But you're just at the start of your spiritual awakening in this lifetime." And like my ego was a little bit like, what does she mean? I've been studying like Tibetan
Of
Buddhism all these
course.
years and doing all this work. And I was like, okay. But I didn't believe her because I always had this perception of mediums that they saw spirit, like, like they see a person and it's just like a conversation. And I'm like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
see any of that, But then, like, upon reflection and over the next 5 years of me resisting this path, like very harshly, I started to have very significant experiences where I was like, falling asleep. I was hearing people talk to me. I was hearing voices. I was seeing faces, I was seeing eyes, like just like there was flashes of it. I
Yep.
think that, like, my guides were kind of like, okay, like nudging you, like you're getting older, like you need to like get moving on your mission. So yeah, like long story short, I finally took a mediumship class and I really had this deep embedded belief, two of them actually, that I really needed to sort through. And one was that I was going to be killed, murdered, or held responsible if I came out as a medium, because
Mm-hmm.
in past lifetimes, I mean, I don't know if you believe in past lives, but I do.
Absolutely, I do.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
I feel like many of us have had many witch lifetimes where we've had to hide our power, keep it hidden away, or if we did, we were killed or whatever, cast out. So there's definitely this underlying fear and potentially even like a past life a contract where we're like, I'm never doing that again. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So yeah, I worked through a bit of that. And then the other belief was that, like, or myth, I would say, is that in order to be a medium, you need to be able to see spirit. Like, mediumship is so subtle. Okay.
So subtle. People do not
I don't
understand
understand it. I
how
wish it
subtle it is.
wasn't. It would make our job so much easier if it
So
was.
much. Because I feel like spirit communication comes in. I explain it to people as I'm doing sessions. I'm like, it's like a puzzle,
Yeah.
or it's like a sentence that all the words are in the wrong order. So
Right.
I have to like take a moment and really process
Yeah.
the message. But go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I tell people, like, look, like, if you're, I was very sensitive. I was told, oh, you're so sensitive, you're too sensitive,
Hmm.
what we call like an empath, right? I'm very affected by other people's feelings. That's our clear sentience. That's our clear feeling, right? And so that psychic sense is actually the most important. And when I teach mediumship, I'm like, look, you could be the most amazing medium in the world and never see anything and never
Hmm.
hear anything. And do you know why? Because it's all about the feeling. Because in clairsentience, that's where the memories are, that's where the emotions, that's where the love is, that's where, like, it's like you could actually unfold the entire story of someone's life
Hmm.
just going into the feeling. So, and even, like, honestly and truly, visuals are not reliable, and not every spirit communicator uses visuals.
Hmm.
They're different, their personalities are different, their energy is different, and how they blend with you is different. So I will say this: initially, when people are, quote, like intuitive or psychic, or they're kind of like dipping their toe in the mediumship pond, they're like, oh, well, I have this and I have this, but I don't have the other ones. They're all going to open up. And we should be open to all the facets every time we do a reading. I've done
Yep.
thousands of readings, and every single time it's different. So
Hmm.
forget about it. Like, you might have a little bit of like a training wheels for some time, and then those training wheels are flying off. Just when you get used to like one way of communicating with spirit, it goes, right? So
I joke, I say, I guess my Claire audience is kicking up this season,
right.
because now I'm hearing, because Claire
Mhm.
sentience has always been my strongest.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
the knowing and the feeling.
That's it. Think of it this way. Imagine, like, okay, a spirit communicator is showing you an orange. It's like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to turn to my sitter and be like, oh, they're showing me an orange. Like, what, do you have any connection to an orange? Like, it's actually terrible mediumship to continuously ask questions, right? It's like,
Mhm.
you should just be getting the information and like, feeling it and going into it and then being like, I feel this, like speak as if you are them, right? So they're showing me an orange. What am I going to do? Am I going to say that? No. So I'm going to take that orange and I'm going to move it down into the clairsentience and I'm going to feel, what does it feel like? And this is actually a true reading that I did. So I will share with you.
Awesome.
So I was like, oh, I feel like I'm holding this orange. And I just allowed myself to go into the feeling so much. I'm like, I feel like I want to peel this orange and I'm peeling it in such a way that I'm trying to like get the peel off like in one piece. And I'm like, and I feel like he was like almost like competing with you. Like you guys would have this thing where you would peel the orange and you try to get off in one piece. And I look up and this girl is crying her freaking
Mhm.
eyes out. She's like, that is my dad. And we used to do that every week. Like we would just sit there with these oranges and try to like have like a contest about peeling. So like we have no idea actually, like until we take that visual, that little, and it was a flash of an orange. It was like less than a second. It was like, oh, orange gone. Like, and then I just took it into there and then I was able to get the memory from that feeling, and like then maybe some other clairs will come where it's like the scent, or I feel like
Mhm.
I'm in a kitchen and I feel like, this is actually not his kitchen, but this is like grandma's kitchen. So all of this is from feeling, right? And so mediumship is such a subtle thing that it's good to just expect the unexpected, because
Mhm.
our sensitivities and our clairs, what we're open to, changes with the moon cycle, depending if you're affected by that, depends on your mood, your energy levels, where you are, how grounded you are. So like it's never going to be the same. And if you're
Mhm.
constantly expecting the same, you're going to go into your thinking mind, your connection to spirit, you're going to lose your link because you're now thinking like, oh fuck, like
Mhm.
it's not coming. If we're constantly looking for visuals, they're not going to come. It's going to be like meh, meh, meh. Like so to go back to your original question, I'm sorry, I will give you like a million TED Talks, but I
I love TED Talks. It's
right,
like,
my visual stuff is very subtle mostly, and it's very much like yours, like it's subjective, it's in my mind's eye, and it's very quick flashes of like little mini movies. So sometimes
mhm.
it's more, and it's like a little bit more of a mini movie. Sometimes I'm psychically viewing, I'm hovering above the scene, but it's different every time. Again, it really just depends on the spirit communicator.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like I had a reading the other day that I did and all I saw was a flash of a farm.
Mhm.
And I was like, he had a farm or something. I was like, I'm just gonna go with what I'm saying.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you tell me if it's right or if it's not, we just move on and we go to something else, you
Right.
know? And then I was like, why is he dressed like a scarecrow? In my mind, I'm thinking Halloween, but scarecrows are dressed like farmers.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, like a farmer. But I found it interesting while you were talking because you said when you were 30, you went to that reading and then you had some resistance for about 5 years. So you really dove into this when you were 35. And I dove into this when I was 35 as well.
Wow.
And
See?
that's when everything opened for me. So
Mhm.
it's really interesting, the parallels of
Mhm.
everything and what we spoke about earlier, how we even came to be connected.
Yeah.
But yeah, 35 took Reiki, my crown opened, and then it was like this woman turned to me in that class, in the Reiki 1 class, and she's like, you're a medium. Spirit's telling me to, I go, I am not a fucking medium. I am not talking to spirit. I am not. I was in resistance for about 2 years.
Right.
And then
It's
I had
really
no
common.
chance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
because
so
it's
common.
scary as hell.
Mhm.
It's scary.
Yeah. And I think because of my journey, and I really had no one to turn to be like, oh, well, what do I do with this info? In fact, I went to one teacher who was like a spiritual teacher of a very
Hmm.
well-known medium. And she was like, I don't know what you are. I don't know if you're a medium. And you know what? Actually, it was a really important lesson for me because no one can actually tell you. We could tell you about possibilities, right? Like I'm tuning
Hmm.
in and I can see what someone has been in a past life and I can see what their purpose is in this life. That was a gift that really God gave me because of what I went through, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, so I can help people to understand who they are. And all I'm doing really is holding up that divine mirror. But it's really careful. You have to be really careful because there are people out there that they are intimidated by your power and what your potential is limitless actually, so
Hmm.
no one can actually really tell you that. Everyone is a medium, truthfully,
Yes.
right? And so but not everyone who is mediumistic or naturally mediumistic is meant to be a medium in this lifetime. It's just not in their, it's not their soul's plan, really. They may have been an incredibly powerful medium, and they may need to learn some protection and grounding and how to just like keep their energy in and not be reading people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's not like their thing. And oftentimes in my mediumship classes, there are people from all walks of life. I have doctors, I have mental health professionals, I have teachers, anyone, and it actually can be very much applicable not only to your own healing journey to just refine and open up that skill, but also just in life. I think it's like a life skill to like understand how to
Mm-hmm.
feel and how to communicate feeling, and to understand it. And when there's understanding around something, especially death, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then there's no fear, right? That fear is replaced with love and acceptance, and and so yeah, I think actually everybody should learn. They should teach mediumship in school. That's my opinion.
I think they should definitely be teaching at least getting in touch with your own inner voice
Yeah.
and understanding, because we're so inundated in the world with so much stimulation on purpose to
Mhm.
keep us from hearing that inner voice. So when people are like, I think I'm psychic,
Mhm.
this happened, I had a dream, and then this happened, I'm like, everybody's psychic. I go, everybody has the ability to open those things. It's not necessarily like it, some people are just more natural with it.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily like a gift that only some certain people are given. It's just certain people decide that they're, I don't want to say brave, but kind of, because I had to take a mediumship class because my ex-boyfriend's brother, who was hit by a car in a hit and
Oh
run
my gosh.
2 months prior, was following me. His spirit was following me through my studio. So my introduction to
Wow.
mediumship was like slap in the face. You don't
Wow.
have a choice. Let's figure out how to deal with this.
Wow.
But I just want to say thank you so much for your time. I love talking about this stuff, and I honestly probably could go on for hours
Me too.
because it's just, it comes from our soul. It lights us up. It's in our flow, and it's what we're here to talk about. And for the listeners, I hope you got something out of this, because opening your mind up to something new and hearing different points of view, especially about something as stigmatized and scary as death can be, and I think it's made to be scary basically from religion, but whatever, we'll go into that another time. But I hope you got something from this, because I enjoyed this very much, and talking to you, Lindsey. And Lindsey, if somebody wants to find you and get more information or have a session, how do we do that?
Do you want me to answer you?
Yep.
So the name of my business is Hudson Mind Body Spirit, and I am on Instagram at Hudson Mind Body Spirit, and my website is hudsonmindbodyspirit.com, and my actual page is just my name, Lindsey Guttilla, on Instagram as well. I post a lot of very charged, politically and humanity charged things on my personal page. So, but I just keep it real. I don't care. And I think now more than ever, with everything going on in the world, people are really realizing how fragile life is. And there's just this deeper need for connection, for healing, for understanding, and talking about death and grief and loss opens up those connections. It brings people together in their vulnerability and allows for healing to take place. So yeah, just learning to live more fully through having these conversations. So thank you so much for creating this space and inviting me to chat.